Welcome back. South Korea is reportedly the only developed country where the act of tattooing is outlawed unless you're a medical doctor. Now, for more on this reality and its comparison to countries elsewhere, I have Jack Barton here in the studio. Jack, welcome back.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
I also have Gerlind Vollmer at Deutsche Welle live on the line. Gerlind, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Jack, we'll start here in the studio. Late last month, the Constitutional Court here upheld its earlier ruling against tattooing by those who do not have a medical degree. Perhaps we can start with a bit of background information regarding this particular ruling, that is, for our viewers who join us from abroad.
In a legal sense, it begins back in 1992, when the Supreme Court ruled that while tattooing would be allowed, it was a medical practice. This actually followed a precedent set in Japan, and South Korea followed that, probably because it was a way to enact a ban without actually calling it a ban, because of course 99.9% of doctors have no interest at all in doing tattoos, and they're certainly not going to set up a tattoo gun and ink in the corner of their clinic. So it's not a ban, but it is a ban. Then in 2016 there was a challenge. We saw at that time it was 7 judges to 2 voting in favor of upholding this ban, and then earlier in the year we saw another challenge by tattooists, and we saw a narrower margin of 5 judges voting to uphold it against 4 judges. So we're seeing that, and then last month upholding, but a redefinition again, stating that while the judges say, it doesn't treat or prevent any disease, it represents a public health risk, and this is why they say it still has to be carried out by medical practitioners. Japan dropped or overturned its ruling back in 2020. So as you mentioned, South Korea now the only developed nation in the world where it's still illegal to give someone a tattoo.
Right, and Gerlind, for the sake of comparison, could you tell us a bit about the law governing tattooing over there in Germany?
Yeah, so my answer could be rather short, because there is really nearly none, but there are some things. So the first thing is that mostly you have to be grown up, so you have to be 18, or if you're underage, you need to have a written statement by your parent that they are okay with you getting tattooed, but most tattoo studios only tattoo people over 18. And then the other thing is, I could, if I don't want to be a journalist anymore, I could tomorrow go to register my business and open a tattoo studio, because there's nearly no regulation. I need a health certificate, and then I can buy a tattoo machine or buy me a bamboo stick and start. And it's really not regulated. So even in the tattoo scene, some things say, okay, they're black sheep, and good tattoo studios try to do sort of education by themselves. So they take young people and say, okay, you can practice on a sort of artificial skin, and you do an internal exam, because there are no state exams. And the only ruling who has just come into practice this January 2020 is a European Union ruling is a prohibition of colors. Because most colors, they have chrome or nickel or copper inside, and those chemical substances can harm your health, can cause allergies, and they're also under suspicion to cause cancer. So the European Union did prohibit all those colors and asked the tattoo industry perhaps to develop other colors, which well, all these ingredients are not inside. So for the moment, in Germany, all the European Union, it's only black, white, and gray tattoos which are allowed. And if you want to have a colorful tattoo, you have to go outside European Union, for instance, to the UK, who recently just left the European Union.
Right, I see. And Jack, in comparison then, how do you explain the overall sense of reservation with regard to tattooing or tattoos here in the country, that is amid the older generation as opposed to their younger counterparts?
Well, I think we've all been through this in other countries. It's just we've been through it a bit earlier. My grandparents would have been appalled at tattoos, but in South Korea, well, in Korea, tattoos have a long tradition, but they're a completely negative tradition. So even 1,000 years ago, we saw the only people who got tattoos at the time were criminals who had their tattoos either tattooed on their had their crimes tattooed on their arm or their face, and slaves. And then in more recent modern times, it's been crime gangs who identify themselves with their gangs through tattoos. And these are really the only people in society who had tattoos. And so when you saw it, there was always a negative connotation. And even today, if we're watching the news and we see someone being brought down to the court and they have tattoos, the camera will always zoom in as if to say, look at this is clearly a bad person, they have tattoos. And so we're seeing that very strongly amongst the older generation. But of course, amongst the younger generation, the 20-somethings, the people who really want to get tattoos, that's all changing. They're watching media from all around the world, and they see for people their age everywhere, it's essentially normal now. The latest Gallup poll for people in their 20s here, I think 80% supported overturning this ban. If you make that a general, the Gallup poll, I think it was around 50%. So you see that it's really the younger generation is very much for overturning this ruling, while the older generation, for all of those reasons stated before, is still very reluctant. They see it as taboo, as stigmatizing.
Right, they do. Gerlind, as a foreign journalist then, observing the events unfolding here in South Korea from beyond national borders, that would be, what are your personal thoughts on the debate here with regard to tattooing?
Yeah, to be honest, I was very astonished because I'm not a South Korean specialist. I even didn't know that there is a country where tattoos are not common, because if you go here through Berlin, you see, even we have summer now, so people show more or less body parts. So you see more tattoos coming up. And sometimes in some areas, for instance, if you go in a concert, you really feel nearly naked if you have no tattoo, because everyone is tattooed. And also you see more tattoos coming up in areas when before no one had tattoos, like even on the skin of your face or of your upper body. And so I'm kind of astonished, but I can understand this in line with this color decision, which we had recently in the European Union. And I see that the state might also protect its people against potential health risks. So I can understand this, and but I think also, like, finally, it's a personal decision. So for the sake of personal freedom, I can imagine that everyone should decide himself, but should be really, people should really explain what kind of risks are behind. And so I would say from our German point of view, I really can't understand the discussion. It was very interesting what Jack was saying before, where tattoos historically come from, because it was the same in Europe. But it was prison inmates and some marine people working on ships. But this is really the past. This is like 50 years ago. And then it gradually developed. So in the 90s, there was one tattoo, a tribal tattoo in the upper back, which many people had. And now it's other figures in style. And young people, if you ask like pupils, students in school, do you want a tattoo? Most of them say yes. And they're really thinking, how can they express their personality with a tattoo? And yeah, so it's, for me, it's perhaps sort of, I can understand it for the health risks, but for me, it's sort of behind.
Right. You just reminded me of something my daughter was telling her father, that she'd like to have a tattoo of a butterfly on her hand or something. He was completely appalled, as you said. Now, Jack, what look to be the broader implications of limiting the practice of tattooing to the medical arena, do you think?
Well, the medical profession is actually supporting, this position. Most of them say it is a public health risk, and they are backing it. But really, the overall effect is just to keep it underground, which is where it is at the moment. The conservative estimate here, the lowest number, is that there are 50,000 illegal tattoo artists in South Korea, and that about 1 million South Koreans have a tattoo. So, you're pushing it underground. You're ensuring there are no health and safety standards. So, if there is no licensing, if there is no process, then it's really the Wild West out there. And also, they face the very real threat of prosecution by the law. There are several tattoo artists doing roughly 2-year jail sentences, big fines. We saw recently an artist who has even tattooed people like Brad Pitt, hit with a huge fine because he was tattooing a Korean actor on YouTube, where of course it was in the public domain. So really the only effect is not going to stop it. You know, so many people have tattoos. There are so many tattoo artists out there. It just ensures there are no regulations. There are no health and safety out there. And I've heard that even in the very few medical practices where it is conducted, they sneakily bring in illegal tattoo artists, because yes, doctors know about sterilizing needles, but what do they know about doing a beautiful rose on someone's back? Absolutely nothing.
Right, I see. And now, against this backdrop, a team of researchers at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology have developed tattoos that can serve as health monitoring devices. For more on this, I have the head of that team, Professor Steve Park at KAIST, live on the line. Professor Park, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so Professor, do tell us a bit about this innovative application of tattoos as developed by your team.
So our tattoo ink is made up of a material called liquid metal combined with carbon nanotubes. And the distinguishing feature of our tattoo ink is that it is stretchable, conductive, and when applied to the epidermis, it dries very quickly. And also it's very durable, so it doesn't rub off very easily. Lastly, it's also very biocompatible, meaning it's very safe to use. And what we showed with this tattoo is that we can detect various biosignals coming from the body. For instance, we can measure ECG. We also made biosensors to detect biomarkers in sweat. And also we made heaters for pain treatment purposes. And lastly, the distinguishing feature of using tattoos as a health monitoring device compared to that of the traditional wearable devices, which are typically patch type. The bad thing about patch type is that they are relatively uncomfortable to the user. But our tattoo, if you use tattoo, so the user has a much more comfortable time basically having it on. They don't really feel it. And also you can easily wash it off just with soap. So that makes it much more convenient for the user.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Park, I understand your research itself is still in its very early stages, of course. And what are some of the tasks then that lie ahead?
So the current issues that still need to be solved is, firstly, we have to integrate a computer chip with the tattoo so that we can communicate wirelessly to an external device, so that the whatever signal that we're getting from the body can be received by an external device like our smartphone or our computer. Also, we are trying to enable motion detecting capability using our tattoo. So that would add another layer of health monitoring to our tattoo. And also we can potentially enable metaverse applications where a person's motion can be replicated in a virtual world. So I think there are many different possibilities with our tattoo technology.
Right. Moving forward, Professor Park, do you suppose the potential adoption of your technology perhaps will serve to shift the general public perception about tattoos here in South Korea?
Yes, so I think tattoos are already being integrated slowly into the Korean society. You can tell that by the number of people with tattoos compared to how it was back then in the past. I think that my technology will give functionality to tattoos. So instead of the tattoos being solely for the purpose of expressing oneself artistically, but it can also serve a particular purpose. For example, your tattoo can now be used as a health monitoring device. So I think in that sense, the society can accept tattoos more broadly, just with the implementation of my technology.
Right, I see. All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for making the time to join us live with your thoughts, and best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you for having me.
Right then, here in the studio again, Gerlind actually, staying with public perception, I hear one German hotel chain, I believe, has been promoting a tattoo campaign to recruit workers amid, of course, a severe shortage in labor. Gerlind, could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, that's right. I also saw the campaign. So I think this has to do with COVID, because in the COVID time, all the hotels and restaurants had to close. Now it's gradually opening up, or has been more or less open up here in Germany. And there's a big labor shortage, because in the time of COVID, people just went elsewhere or find other jobs or open their own business. And so this is a hotel group who wants to be very hip and being in a big city. And this has to do with also what Jack was telling before. I think it's a general trend all over, not only in Korea, but also here in Germany, that tattoos are seen something of fancy people, hip people, inside people. And so this hotel say, okay, if you stay with us for 6 months, we pay you a tattoo which is worth 500 euros. And like if you want to have a tattoo, a small tattoo saying like a little rose or a little animal, which is perhaps as big as the palm of your hand, the average price here in Germany is 100 to 200 euros, depending to which tattoo studio you go. So if you get 500 euros, you can do like a bigger one or perhaps several ones. So, and this hotel chain, I think they want to distinguish themselves, saying we're cool people, you can come with us, you're not staying in a sort of aseptic environment, you're there with friends, you'll have fun. They have also bar with this 24 hours open, but there's no restaurant. So this is they want to have young, hip, urban clients, and they want to distinguish themselves from others. So it's an interesting idea, but perhaps also born a little bit out of desperation.
And Gerlind, what do you suppose has been the response, the public response that is, to that particular hotel's tattoo campaign?
It has not really been outstanding, because tattoos, as I said earlier, but perhaps my perception is also a little bit biased, because I'm living in Berlin, where many people are tattooed. Like in the average, every 10th German has a tattoo, and has several tattoos, and 14% of Germans have a tattoo. And I think the density of tattoos here in Berlin is just much higher than if you would go to a conservative area, perhaps in the south of Germany. Yeah, people accept it. It's yes, why not? So, and for some reasons, like if you're a musician, people really expect you to have a tattoo. But if you're perhaps a judge or a lawyer or a bank clerk, then you can have a tattoo, but perhaps you should have a long sleeve shirt. So it didn't make big waves, but it's just a sort of a marketing gag. So yeah, I don't know. It's perhaps not a gag, but it's an interesting approach to seek personal.
Right. Back here in South Korea, Jack, there's a campaign, an online campaign actually, led by those in the tattooing industry field, so to speak, to legalize tattoo here in South Korea. That being said, in your opinion, is tattooing perhaps a form of artistic expression, or do you believe that it should be a medical practice as ruled by the Constitutional Court here?
There should be some health and safety oversight, and I think in a lot of countries, say Australia, the United States, you have to go through rigorous health and safety training. You also have to do specific needle safety training, sanitization. You have to do hundreds of hours of apprenticeship, and there's lots of hoops you have to go through to be certified. So, you know, clearly there is that side of it. And you want to have a nice artistic tattoo. Most people do, not everybody. So there's the artistic side, but I think the big thing, it's just youthful angst, or the passion of youth. When you're in your 20s, when you're in your 30s, you're trying to step away from the previous generation, or perhaps separate yourself from the mainstream, or in places where everybody, all your friends, has a tattoo, and it is the mainstream. It's about establishing yourself within that social framework. So I think it's just about being young and about expressing yourself, and that rolls through into the 30s. And after that, yes, some people still do get tattoos, but you see a big drop off, and often they're covering up the old tattoos they're a bit embarrassed about getting when they were 21, or perhaps having some of them removed. So yeah, look, it's an expression of youth, and on top of that, there is an artistic side, and there should be a health and safety side.
Right, of course. Gerlind, what do you propose to perhaps bridge the gap of the differences here in South Korea with regard to tattooing?
Yeah, I would think perhaps something in the middle. I'm not in a position to propose something to the Constitutional Court of South Korea, but I think if people do it illegally, there might be more harm than if it would be controlled and you have a proper sort of education, like how to learn it. And because it's something as if I buy a suit which doesn't fit me, I can just put it away, but my tattoo will stay with me, or whether I have to go to a dermatologist to get it lasered, and that's costly and makes much pain, or I have to have a cover up. So a better tattoo artist who will just integrate the failed tattoo into a nicer one. So that's much thing. So I think the demand there, and because as we see it as a global phenomenon, I don't think that South Korea can stay behind, that you can isolate people and say, okay, you can get your tattoo anywhere but not here. So I think it would be a wise decision to get it a proper framework for artists, artistic, healthcare, and then see how to go forward.
Right. And Jack, what are your words of advice, perhaps for my husband as well? They've yet to reach a consensus.
Yeah, no hands and face and neck, I would say on that. But in general, I agree with Gerlind. You know, it's about compromise. Now, clearly, there's a critical mass of South Koreans who have tattoos. More are getting tattoos. Very soon, it is going to enter the mainstream. 10 years ago, if I saw a young lady walking down the street with tattoos here, I'd almost stop and what? Now it's just so normal, you know, it's just becoming a normal sight. I think the next time there is a challenge, if you look at the number of judges who are voting in favor of overturning it, it probably will be overturned. And just meet that compromise. So yes, as a tattoo artist, you can work, but you have to go through rigorous health training. You have to do an apprenticeship. You have to be well qualified in your art, not just in the painting side of it, but in the safety side of it as well. But I think it's something that's going to organically happen. You can't turn back on the clock on these things, but yeah, for your daughter, like no hands and no feet, no neck, no face.
I will be sure to tell her as well. All right, as always, Jack, thank you so much for your time. And Gerlind, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.